The phone buzzed, harsh and insistent, at 3 in the morning. A Tuesday. I blinked awake in our apartment in Houston, Texas, disoriented. It was Scarlett. She'd told me she was staying out of state at her mom's place, helping with some family emergency. But the moment I answered, that story evaporated. Loud music. Laughter. The unmistakable clink of glasses. A party. It was definitely not her mom's quiet suburban house. Half asleep, confused, I just asked, "Hey, where are you?" Not accusatory, just trying to reconcile the noise with her story. And that's when she exploded. The scream that tore through the phone was like a physical blow. She launched into this tirade, calling me controlling, suffocating, demanding to know why I always needed to track her every move. I barely managed to get 2 words in before she spat out the line that just broke something inside me: "You're too clingy. Give me space." Then, silence. She'd hung up. I sat there in the dark, my phone a dead weight in my hand, the echo of her fury still ringing in my ears. 2 years we'd been together. 8 months living under the same roof. I thought we were solid. I'd helped her pay off her car loan, supported her through a career change, spent countless weekends with her family, playing the perfect boyfriend. And now, I was clingy for asking a simple question when she was clearly somewhere she shouldn't be, at 3 in the morning, after lying about it. It wasn't anger that filled me. Not sadness, either. It was this cold, crystal-clear realization. I'd been living a part in someone else's play, and I didn't even know the script. I swung my legs out of bed, walked into the living room, and just stood there for what felt like an eternity. My brain finally started catching up to what my gut already knew. This wasn't the first red flag. It was just the one I couldn't ignore anymore. The late-night texts she'd hide. The new passwords on her phone. The girls' nights that sometimes happened 3 times a week. The way she'd accuse me of things I hadn't done, just for asking reasonable questions. There was that one time, about a month prior, I came home early and found her laptop open on the couch. She literally lunged across the room to close it before I could see the screen. Laughed it off, said she was planning a surprise. No surprise ever came. Or the time her phone rang during dinner, and she went absolutely pale. Said it was spam, but I saw a name flash on the screen before she declined the call. I'd made excuses for all of it. Because I loved her. Or, at least, I loved the version of her I thought existed. But that version, if it ever was real, was gone. So, right there, at 3:30 a.m., I made a decision most people would call crazy. But to me, it felt like the sanest thing I'd ever done. I called my friend, Ben, woke him up, and told him I needed his truck first thing in the morning. He just asked if everything was okay. I told him I was moving and needed help, no questions asked. Ben was solid like that, the kind of friend who just shows up. Then, I started packing. Quietly. Moving through the apartment like a ghost. My clothes, my laptop, important documents, anything that was truly mine. Most of the furniture was hers anyway, bought with money I'd helped her earn, but whatever. 2 suitcases, 4 boxes. That was my entire life in that place. Every item I packed felt like erasing evidence I'd ever existed there. My toothbrush from the bathroom, my coffee mug, the hoodie she always borrowed that was actually mine, my books. I left anything that might require an explanation or a conversation. Anything that might give her an excuse to contact me later. She stumbled in around 5 a.m., reeking of alcohol and cologne that definitely wasn't mine. Didn't even look at me. Just mumbled something about being tired and crashed on the bed, fully clothed. Makeup smeared, hair a mess. I stood in the doorway, watching her sleep, and felt absolutely nothing. No urge to wake her, no desire to fight. No jealousy. No heartbreak. Just this overwhelming need to disappear before she woke up and tried to manipulate me into staying. I'd seen her do it before, the tears, the promises, playing the victim until I felt like the bad guy. Not this time. Ben showed up at 7 a.m. with his truck. We loaded everything in one trip. I left my key on the kitchen counter, took one last look around, and walked out. She was still passed out. I didn't leave a note. Didn't send a text. Didn't give her any explanation, because honestly, she didn't deserve one. The drive to Ben's place took 15 minutes. In that time, I made a list. First thing, my phone. I went to the store that afternoon, got a completely new number, a new phone. Didn't transfer anything. I wanted zero connection to that old life. The sales guy asked if I wanted to port my old number. No, I said. Fresh start. Then I blocked her on every single platform before she even knew I was gone. Blocked her friends, her sister, her mom, everyone in her orbit. I sold the engagement ring I'd been saving for. The one I was planning to propose within 2 months. I'd bought it 3 months prior, spent weeks picking it out, imagining the proposal, our future. Mr. Henderson, the jeweler, gave me this sympathetic look. Didn't ask questions. Just counted out the cash. I got back about 60% of what I paid. Didn't even care. That money became my escape fund. My job was remote anyway. I told my boss, Ms. Davies, I was relocating for personal reasons. She just said to keep her updated on my new address for tax purposes. Within 4 days, I had an apartment lined up in Raleigh, North Carolina, 800 miles away from everything I knew. I picked a city where I didn't know anyone, somewhere she'd have no reason to look for me. Somewhere I could truly start over. The whole process took 2 weeks, from that phone call to the moment I drove across state lines with everything I owned in my car. She tried calling my old number, probably 100 times. Left voicemails that went from confused to angry to desperate to threatening. She showed up at Ben's place, but he played dumb perfectly. She tried my work email, messaged my coworkers on LinkedIn, even called my brother, who I hadn't spoken to in a year. Everyone got the same message from me: don't tell her anything. I'm fine. I'll explain later. She posted on social media about toxic men who abandoned their girlfriends without explanation. Painted herself as the victim. All her friends rallied around her. I watched it all from my new apartment, through a fake account, for maybe 2 days. Then I deleted everything and went completely dark. My new life was quiet. Almost boring. It was exactly what I needed. I got a gym membership. Started therapy to unpack all the manipulation I'd lived through. Made new friends who knew nothing about my past. My therapist helped me see patterns I'd been blind to. Helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't normal relationship conflict. It was systematic manipulation. I dated casually, nothing serious, just remembering what it felt like to be around people who didn't make me feel crazy for having normal expectations. 3 years went by like that. 3 years of peace, of building myself back up, of becoming someone I actually respected. I never thought about reaching out. Never wondered what she was doing. Never felt tempted to check if she'd changed. And then, one afternoon, I was sitting in the Daily Grind coffee shop near my apartment, laptop open, working on a project. Someone sat down across from me. I looked up. And there she was. Scarlett. Sitting there like we'd planned this meeting. Like 3 years of complete silence had never happened. She looked different, older, maybe a little tired around the eyes. But she had that same expression I remembered, the one where she acted like she had control of every situation. My first instinct was to just close my laptop and leave, walk out without saying a word, just like I'd left that apartment 3 years ago. But something held me there. Maybe curiosity. Maybe just shock that she'd actually found me. I glanced around the coffee shop, wondering if this was coincidence, or if she'd been tracking me. Her face told me it was planned. She didn't apologize. Didn't explain how she tracked me down. Didn't acknowledge the 3 years of silence. Just looked at me with this calculated expression and said, "We need to talk." I stayed quiet, waiting for whatever game she was about to play. I knew it was coming. I'd learned her patterns too well to think this was a chance encounter. Then she hit me with it. The words that would have destroyed the old me. The version of me from 3 years ago who still believed her lies. "I'm pregnant. You're the father." She said it so casually, like she was talking about the weather, leaning back in her chair, watching my face for a reaction. I just sat there, processing. Doing the math in my head. 3 years since I'd left. 3 years of zero contact. And somehow, I was the father of a pregnancy happening right now? The timeline didn't even make sense. But she kept talking. Saying she'd been trying to reach me for months. That she had a right to tell me. That I had responsibilities now. She pulled out her phone, showed me an ultrasound picture that could have been anyone's. Could have been pulled off the internet for all I knew. I asked her how she found me. She got vague. Mentioned something about a mutual friend seeing me at a restaurant downtown. Said she'd been looking for me because this was important. She wouldn't give me a name. Wouldn't provide details. Just kept redirecting back to the pregnancy. Red flag number 1. Then she started talking about money. How hard it's been. Child support. How I owed her for disappearing. She had this whole script prepared, probably rehearsed it in the car. I could see her watching my face, waiting for the panic or guilt to kick in. She mentioned specific numbers. Said she'd already talked to a lawyer about what I'd owe monthly. Talked about back pay for the months she'd supposedly been trying to find me. But I'd spent 3 years learning exactly how her manipulation worked. 3 years in therapy understanding the patterns. I wasn't that guy anymore. I told her we'd need a paternity test before we discussed anything. Her whole demeanor shifted in a second. Defensive. Her voice rising slightly. Started saying I didn't trust her, that it was insulting. That she wouldn't have come all this way if she wasn't absolutely sure. She put her hand on her stomach in this theatrical way, playing the offended pregnant woman card. I just repeated myself, no test, no conversation. She realized the old tactics weren't working. The tears she'd probably planned to use stayed in reserve. She switched strategies. Got softer. Leaned forward across the table. Started talking about how much she'd changed. How she regretted everything. How she'd been going to therapy, too. She mentioned the night I left, called it a misunderstanding, said she was going through something back then and handled it wrong. It was a masterclass in manipulation, and I recognized every single move because I'd fallen for all of them before, the softening of the voice, the vulnerable eye contact, the casual touching of my hand, the rewriting of history to make herself the victim. She even brought up good memories. Remember that concert? Remember the beach? Trying to pull me back into nostalgia. We left the coffee shop after about 30 minutes. She said she'd arranged the test, gave me her new number, told me she was staying with family nearby for a few weeks. She hugged me before leaving, pressed herself against me in a way that felt calculated, whispered that she was glad she found me. I watched her walk to her car, a nice new sedan that made me wonder about her story of struggling financially. The next day, she texted me the address of a lab. Someplace I'd never heard of, with a sketchy website that looked like it was made in 2005. The reviews were suspicious, all 5 stars with generic comments, and the address led to what looked like a strip mall office. I told her no. Said we'd use a court-approved facility or nothing at all. She freaked out over text. Accused me of trying to avoid responsibility. Said I was making everything difficult on purpose. That any lab would show the same results. So why did it matter? I didn't respond. I found a proper testing facility myself. One that was certified, with actual credentials, and sent her the information. 3 days later, her mom, Eleanor, started calling me from different numbers. I didn't answer the first few, but she left voicemails. Long, rambling messages about how I'd abandoned her daughter. How I'd traumatized her. How I was a coward for running away 3 years ago. She called from her work phone, from what I assumed were friends' numbers, even tried texting from an email-to-text service. Every message was the same theme, painting me as the villain, demanding I step up and be a man, saying her daughter deserved better. She brought up things from our relationship that I'd never told her, which meant Scarlett had been feeding her information, coaching her on what to say. It felt coordinated. Like they'd planned this whole campaign to break me down psychologically before the test even happened. The pressure was supposed to make me agree to whatever they wanted, maybe even skip the test altogether and just start paying. I blocked every number that came through. Stayed focused on the one thing that mattered, getting that DNA test done at a legitimate facility. The appointment was set for the following Tuesday at 2 p.m. I showed up 15 minutes early. She arrived 20 minutes late with a baby that looked about 4 months old and some guy I'd never seen before, maybe late 20s, sleeve tattoos, uncomfortable expression. She didn't introduce him. He just stood behind her, looking at his shoes, while she held the crying baby. The whole scene felt staged, like she brought him for emotional support or maybe to intimidate me. The baby kept crying through the whole process. Scarlett kept making comments about how stressful this was, how unnecessary, how I was putting her through hell for no reason. The guy, Tyler, didn't say a word, just stared at his phone, occasionally glancing at me with this hostile look. The technician took the samples professionally, didn't react to any of the drama. Explained the process calmly. Told us results would be available in 3 to 5 business days. Through an online portal. Scarlett tried to talk to me in the parking lot after, but I got in my car and left without engaging. Those 3 days waiting for results were weird. Part of me wondered what I'd do if the test somehow came back positive. If there was some microscopic chance the timeline worked out in a way I hadn't considered. I ran through scenarios in my head. Thought about what kind of father I'd be. Whether I could co-parent with someone I'd completely cut out of my life. How I'd protect a child from her manipulation. But the bigger part of me, the part that had learned to trust my instincts, knew this was another manipulation. The timeline didn't work. Her behavior didn't make sense. Everything about how she approached this screamed desperation rather than honesty. On the 3rd day, I got the email notification. Results ready. I was at work, sitting in a meeting about quarterly projections. My phone lit up. I excused myself, said I needed to take an important call, went to the bathroom, logged into the portal, and there it was. In clean, clinical language, probability of paternity, 0%. I was not the biological father. I stood there staring at my phone screen, reading it 3 times to make sure I understood correctly. 0%. Not mine. Not even close. I felt this wave of relief wash over me, followed immediately by anger. Not the hot, explosive kind, but cold and clear. She tried to trap me. Tried to use a baby that wasn't mine to manipulate me back into her life. Probably needed money or stability or just wanted to feel like she still had control over me. And she'd gotten her mom involved. A family operation. I forwarded the results to my email, saved copies in 3 different places, including a USB drive. Then I went back to my meeting like nothing happened. I didn't call her. Didn't text her. Just waited to see what she'd do next. She called me that evening from a number I hadn't blocked yet. When I answered, she was already screaming. Calling me every name she could think of. Saying I'd sabotaged the test. That the lab made a mistake. That there was no way those results were accurate. I just listened. Put the phone on speaker. Didn't interrupt. Let her tire herself out. Nothing I said would matter anyway. She went through every excuse. I must have bribed someone, the samples got mixed up, she'd take it to another facility. When she finally paused to breathe, I told her the results were from a court-approved facility that she'd agreed to use. If she had problems with them, she could take it up with the judge. That set her off again. More screaming. About me abandoning another responsibility. How I'd always been a coward. How karma would get me eventually. I hung up. Blocked that number. Assumed that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, she created new social media accounts just to message me. Paragraphs of text about how I'd ruined her life. How she'd made mistakes, but I was worse for disappearing. How I owed her something for the emotional damage I'd caused. The messages came at all hours. Some apologetic. Some threatening. Some trying to guilt me about the baby who needed a father figure, even if I wasn't the biological dad. I blocked those accounts without reading past the first few lines. Then her mom, Eleanor, started emailing me at my work address. Which meant they'd been digging. The emails were long, detailed accusations about my character. Threats about legal action. Demands that I pay for various things she claimed I was responsible for. She said I owed her daughter for the emotional trauma of the breakup, for the apartment deposit when I left, for the therapy she'd needed afterward. I forwarded all of them to a folder labeled harassment and didn't respond. 3 weeks after the test results, I got served with papers at my office. A process server walked right up to my desk during lunch, asked if I was me, confirmed my full name, and handed me an envelope. In front of half my coworkers. It was humiliating, which I'm sure was part of their strategy. My boss, Ms. Davies, walked by right as it happened, gave me this concerned look, but didn't say anything. Inside was a lawsuit. An actual legal complaint filed in civil court, claiming I owed her $45,000 for emotional trauma, stress-induced medical issues, and lost wages from the relationship and breakup. The document was 12 pages long, full of exaggerated stories and outright lies about things I'd supposedly done or said. She claimed I'd isolated her from friends, controlled her finances, monitored her phone, caused her anxiety and depression that required medical treatment and medication. None of it was true. But it was all written in official legal language, with exhibits attached, printed text messages taken out of context, statements from her friends who'd never even met me. I took the papers home, read through them carefully that night, and then called a lawyer the next morning. My attorney, Ms. Albright, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd seen every divorce and breakup mess imaginable. She read through the complaint while I sat in her office, asked me some questions about the relationship and the DNA test, and then told me this was a textbook case of someone trying to use the legal system for revenge and a payout. She said cases like this rarely went anywhere, but we needed to respond properly and show up to court. Ignoring it wasn't an option. The legal fees started adding up immediately, retainer plus hourly rates. I was spending money I'd saved for a down payment on a house just to defend myself against lies. We filed our response, included the DNA test results, provided my own timeline of the relationship and breakup, and requested that her lawsuit be dismissed. Ms. Albright also filed a counterclaim for my legal fees, arguing that this was a frivolous lawsuit intended to harass me. She said the counterclaim would send a message that I wasn't going to be pushed around. For the next 2 months, it was back and forth paperwork. Discovery requests. Depositions scheduled and rescheduled. Her lawyer tried to make me look bad in every document, twisting normal relationship things into evidence of abuse or control. They subpoenaed my bank records, trying to prove I'd financially manipulated her. But all it showed was me paying for dates, splitting rent, helping with her car loan, like a normal boyfriend would. They wanted my phone records, my emails, trying to find anything they could use. Ms. Albright fought every overreaching request, calling their tactics harassment in official court filings. Scarlett had to sit for a deposition. Ms. Albright tore apart her story. Asked her pointed questions about the pregnancy claim, about why she waited 3 years to contact me, about the timeline that didn't make sense. According to Ms. Albright, she'd contradicted herself multiple times, couldn't keep her story straight when pressed for details. The court date finally arrived on a Wednesday morning in October. I wore my best suit, the one I'd bought for job interviews. Showed up 30 minutes early and sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, watching other cases get called. The county courthouse in Raleigh was busy, people everywhere dealing with their own legal problems, and I felt completely out of place. She arrived 15 minutes late with her mom, Eleanor. Both of them dressed up, both looking confident, like they'd already won. Eleanor glared at me from across the hallway, whispered something to her daughter. We didn't make eye contact. Didn't speak. Just waited for our case to be called. When we finally got in front of the judge, an older man who looked tired of hearing relationship disputes, her lawyer went first. He painted this picture of a controlling relationship where I damaged her mental health, then abandoned her when she needed me most, left her financially struggling, emotionally destroyed. They had printed screenshots of old text messages where I'd asked where she was or who she was with, trying to frame normal communication as surveillance and control. They had a letter from a therapist saying she'd been treated for anxiety and depression, though it didn't mention me specifically or attribute her condition to our relationship. It was all circumstantial stuff that sounded bad if you didn't know the context. Then Ms. Albright stood up and calmly dismantled everything. She presented the timeline of our breakup. Showed how I'd left after being screamed at for asking a reasonable question at 3 o'clock in the morning. Explained that I had every right to end a relationship and cut contact for my own mental health. She brought up the fake pregnancy claim, showed the DNA test results to the judge, and argued that this lawsuit was retaliation for me not falling for that manipulation. Ms. Albright walked through the timeline, showed that the pregnancy was impossible, that this was clearly an attempt to trap me. Then came the part that destroyed her case completely. My lawyer had subpoenaed her social media records through discovery. She found posts from right after I left where Scarlett bragged about being free, about being single and ready to party, about going out with new guys, about living her best life. There were photos from clubs, bars, beach trips with friends, vacation photos from 2 months after I left. Nothing that looked like someone suffering from trauma or lost wages. Ms. Albright projected them on a screen in the courtroom, showed the dates, showed the captions. The judge looked through the evidence, asked her lawyer a few pointed questions that he struggled to answer. Asked why she was claiming emotional trauma while posting party photos. Then he asked Scarlett directly why she'd claimed pregnancy if the DNA test showed otherwise. Why she'd waited 3 years to contact me if she was really struggling. She tried to explain. Stammered something about being confused about dates, about thinking it might be mine, about wanting closure. But it sounded exactly like what it was, a lie that got exposed under scrutiny. Her voice cracked. She looked at her mom for support, but there was nothing left to say. The judge wasn't having it. He dismissed her lawsuit entirely. Said there was no evidence of damages I'd caused. That ending a relationship isn't grounds for a civil suit. That her claims were contradicted by her own social media. Then he granted my counterclaim and ordered her to pay $2,500 toward my legal fees within 60 days. Her face went pale. Her mom started shaking her head. And her lawyer just started packing up his papers, looking annoyed. We walked out of that courtroom, and I could hear her crying in the hallway behind me. Eleanor yelling at the lawyer about appeals, demanding to know why he didn't fight harder. Ms. Albright told me appeals were unlikely and expensive, and most lawyers wouldn't take a case this week, especially after a judge had already called it frivolous. She never paid the $2,500, which didn't surprise me at all. My lawyer said we could pursue collections, take her back to court, potentially garnish wages. But I told her to let it go. I just wanted this finished. I'd already spent enough time and money on this, and chasing her for $2,500 would just keep me connected to her drama. I heard through Ben, who heard from someone else in our old social circle, that she'd had to move back in with her parents because she couldn't afford her rent after the legal fees. Her social media went quiet for months. All those party photos deleted. Then came back with vague posts about fake people and life lessons and how the universe tests you. The usual stuff people post when they won't take accountability for their own choices. As for me, I'm doing better than I ever was with her. I've been seeing someone for about 8 months now. Someone who communicates like an adult. Who doesn't play mind games. Who actually respects boundaries and doesn't disappear to parties at 3 in the morning. We met at a friend's barbecue, started talking about hiking, and things just developed naturally, without drama. My career is going well. I got promoted last year to senior project manager. I have real friends in Raleigh who know the real me, not some version I was pretending to be. I bought a house last month. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. I'm building a life I'm actually proud of. I think about that night at 3 in the morning sometimes, when she screamed at me for asking where she was. And I realize that was the best thing she ever did for me. She asked for space, so I gave it to her. 3 years and an entire state of distance. And when she came back, trying to drag me into her chaos with a fake pregnancy and a lawsuit, I wasn't the same man she used to control. What do you think about this story?